Okay, so fresh off of Leigh Wood dominating Josh Warrington in their rematch, this was a fight that was really one-sided. Even though Leigh Wood never at any point really went for the knockout, really was sitting down on his shots and trying to land those big shots, he was in complete control for the duration of this fight. And you would really struggle to give Josh Warrington more than 2 rounds. I think you'd struggle, in my opinion. Josh Warrington was a guy who was on the front foot. He was trying to push the pace. He was trying to throw some shots, but Leigh Wood was far too elusive for him and was definitely doing the cleaner work as well. Now, I think honestly both guys should probably retire after this. Leigh Wood's 37 and Josh Warrington, I think he's said he's going to retire after this. But I really don't think there's any real route to either guy ever winning a world championship again. Definitely not at 130. And again, at these guys' ages, I don't really want to see them messing about, going to other weight classes. I wouldn't want to see Leigh Wood move down to 126 at this point in his career, because there's some killers at 126, and sure as hell he's not winning a world championship at 135. And Josh Warrington showed that he can't even keep up with Leigh Wood, so he's really done, right? And there were some people predicting a Warrington win. I really couldn't see it. Just thinking of the styles, I know the first fight was competitive, but Leigh Wood stopped him in that fight. But that was a competitive fight. But thinking that was 3 years ago now, and Josh Warrington's not been very active since. At least Leigh Wood's had a couple of fights in that time, right? I think he'd even lost one fight in between that. But Leigh Wood's at least a guy who's been mixing it and doing 12 rounders, right? And having good performances too. In the wins, of course, not necessarily in the losses. But putting a really good performance against Josh Warrington as well. Like I said, controlled the fight from start to finish. Was mixing up to the head, to the body beautifully. Kept Josh Warrington guessing. Was walking him onto shots. And Josh Warrington basically had no sort of path to victory here, because Leigh Wood was not at any point playing Josh Warrington's game. He wasn't going to be a stationary opponent for Warrington to unload on. He wasn't going to just stand there and trade. He wasn't going to let Josh Warrington go first. Leigh Wood was comfortable on the back foot, threw shots first. Like I said, controlled the pace, and that's what you have to do against a fighter like Warrington. Because Warrington, if you don't control the pace and you let Warrington control the pace, he will just steamroll you. If you're a guy of a certain level, and Leigh Wood clearly isn't at that level, because Leigh Wood was able to control it. And that speaks volumes about the quality of boxer that Leigh Wood is, even at this point in his career, that he could control a 12-round fight and never really let Josh Warrington even get into the fight, if we're being honest. Right? Yeah, Warrington had his moments, because, when you're on the front foot and you're throwing that many shots, you're going to have your moments. You are. That's the reality of it. But moments aren't what win 12-round fights. Winning rounds is what wins 12-round fights. Right? So, again, honestly, I think both guys should probably go out on that win, because it's a good win for both guys' resume. Oh, well, not a good win for both guys' resume, but it's a good win for Leigh Wood's resume for sure. And for Josh Warrington, people look back on his career, he lost to Leigh Wood. There's no real shame in losing to Leigh Wood. Leigh Wood's no scrub, right? So he loses to Leigh Wood. That's his last fight. That's how he goes out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And Leigh Wood, he goes up 2-0 over Josh Warrington, sells out 10,000 tickets. I believe that fight was in Nottingham. Does 10,000 tickets in Nottingham. And, he can bow out, There's no point him maybe risking it, sticking around and trying to get a world title shot at 130, because there's some tough fights at 130. Granted, let me not say that. 130 isn't incredibly stacked, but there are guys at the top of the division at 130 that I don't fancy Leigh Wood to beat, right? And I wouldn't want his last fight to be in Nottingham when he gets badly hurt. Because he's been beaten before. He's a beatable boxer, even though he looks very good against Josh Warrington. And like I said, he put on a great boxing performance against Josh Warrington, and he can do that against a lot of guys. But there is a certain caliber of boxer that Leigh Wood cannot do that to, because they are better than Leigh Wood. At no point in Leigh Wood's career has he ever been sort of regarded as the guy at 130. He was always respected. I think he won the IBO world title. He was a guy, in and around the top of the division, but he was never ever regarded as the guy who was the face or the name or the guy in the division, right? Like how Shakur Stevenson was regarded as the guy at 135 for a bit. Like how, Janibek is regarded as the guy at 160. Not a good example, because he's got a 12-month suspension, but the way Boots and Ortiz are seen as the two guys at 154, Leigh Wood was never in those sort of conversations at 130, in my opinion. He was never at those sorts of talks. But again, a guy who's a former world champion, been in there with a ton of top-level guys, but beaten some, lost to some, but he's certainly got a style. He certainly can be worked out, and he's beatable as well. But I say all of that to say, Leigh Wood on the night boxed brilliantly, beat Josh Warrington. Comfortable win for Leigh Wood. Never really in with a sniff, if I'm being honest, for Josh Warrington. And Josh Warrington didn't necessarily turn up bad or out of shape. He looked like a guy who's not boxed in a very long time, and he looked old as well. He looked like Josh Warrington. He looked like an old Josh Warrington. Josh Warrington boxes the way he boxes. He boxes on the front foot, trying to throw punches, trying to throw those combinations, trying to land on you, back you up. That is what Josh Warrington is, but he's too old and too slow to do that to Leigh Wood. Leigh Wood was reading him from a mile away, countering and being first, pushing him about, moving about the ring, never getting pinned down. Done a brilliant job from that point of view in terms of the boxing. But Josh Warrington just wasn't good enough. And again, you're losing two fights to Leigh Wood. And Leigh Wood's a guy who's never been regarded as the top guy at 130. You probably should bow out. Because again, what was it, 10,000 people in Nottingham? That's no... he would have got a nice payday from that, no doubt. Granted, probably wouldn't be a generational wealth payday. It's not the sort of payday where off that single payday alone he can never work again. But he's a guy who's been in world championship fights, been in big events, big fights for years, right? So I'd expect Josh Warrington would have a decent nest egg. Granted, I don't know how he's living outside of the ring. None of us do. None of us are necessarily privy to that. So I don't know the life he's living. But assuming he's been somewhat sensible with his money, he should be able to bow out with a nice little retirement then. Fair play to Josh Warrington, he deserves it. He's a guy who's been at a top level for a while, always put on entertaining fights, always put on exciting fights, had some power at the weight division, seemed to be portrayed in the media well. So yeah, man, shout out to Josh Warrington. If that is all we see from Josh Warrington, it's been a great career, and likely, in my opinion, it probably should be all we see from Leigh Wood as well. And Leigh Wood had a very good career as well, and boxed very well at times, and had some great performances like this one against Josh Warrington. I think that should probably be it for Leigh Wood as well. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest, and I'm out. Peace.